The encounter in the darkened prison. John had always been a curious man, but nothing had prepared him for what he would find that day. He was wandering through the abandoned spaceship, the corridors echoing with the faint hum of ancient machinery. Dust covered the walls, and the air was thick with the smell of forgotten metal and rust. It was a place no one had dared to enter for years, but John was different. He didn't fear the unknown. He sought it. As he moved deeper into the ship, the light from his flashlight flickered. His heartbeat quickened. He had no idea why he was here, but the feeling that something was pulling him forward was impossible to ignore. It wasn't just his curiosity. There was a strange pull in the air, a force that seemed to guide him. John's footsteps echoed loudly as he turned a corner and found himself facing a heavy metal door. The door was old, its surface scarred from years of neglect. He hesitated, for a moment, unsure of what lay beyond, but then he heard something soft breathing, a rustling sound. His heart skipped a beat. Someone or something was on the other side. He pushed open the door with a creak, stepping into a dimly lit room. His eyes struggled to adjust to the shadows, but he soon saw her. She stood in a small cage at the far end of the room, her back turned to him. Her skin was pale, almost glowing in the low light, and her long hair cascaded down her shoulders like a silver waterfall. The creature, no, the girl, was unlike anything John had ever seen. Her skin shimmered in shades of purple, and her eyes, when they met his, were a glowing orange. Despite the wild beauty in her features, there was something sad about her, as if she had been trapped in this place for far too long. She looked at him with a mixture of fear and hope, as if she couldn't believe someone was finally there to help her. John's hands trembled as he approached the cage. He had never seen anything like her before. Alien, perhaps, but there was no mistaking the humanity in her eyes. She was trapped, and he could feel it. It was as though his entire being was telling him that she needed to be freed. "Are you real?" John whispered, almost to himself. The girl's lips parted, and in a soft, melodic voice, she responded, "Yes, I am real, and I am trapped." John felt a deep sense of pity for her. He couldn't leave her here, not like this. The cage seemed too small for her, her body pressed against the cold metal bars, her hands bound by thick chains. She wasn't just a prisoner, she was a prisoner. Of pain, of loneliness, of isolation. No one should live like this. Without thinking, he reached into his bag, pulling out a small set of tools he carried for his scavenging. His hands moved quickly, undoing the locks of the cage. The girl watched him, her eyes full of silent gratitude, but also fear. When the cage door finally opened with a soft click, she stepped out slowly. She was taller than him by a few inches, but there was a grace in her movements, an elegance that seemed otherworldly. Her delicate features seemed to soften as she stepped out into the light, and for the first time in what must have been a long time, she smiled. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling. John was speechless. He had always considered himself brave, but in that moment, standing before this strange alien girl, he felt small. How could he help her now? What was he supposed to do? The girl, sensing his confusion, spoke again. "I am Lyra. I owe you my life, and I will repay you." John looked at her, unsure of what she meant. "Repay me? I just freed you. You don't owe me anything." Her glowing eyes dimmed for a moment, but she stepped closer to him. "You do not understand. What I am offering is more than a simple thank you. I have power, one can give. You a gift, a gift that will change your life forever. John's mind raced. He had heard stories about ancient alien technology, about beings who could manipulate the universe itself, but he had never thought such a thing was real. And yet, here was this girl, offering him something beyond his understanding. Before he could say anything, Lyra took a step back and raised her hand toward him. A soft glow radiated from her fingertips, and a strange warmth filled the room. The air around them seemed to hum, vibrating with energy. "What is this?" John asked, his voice barely a whisper. "A gift," Lyra replied. "One that will change everything." As she moved closer, she pressed something into his hand, a small, glowing orb. It pulsed with a strange energy, and John could feel it in the pit of his stomach, like a beating heart. Lyra's gaze never left him. "This is your gift. Use it wisely." John stared at the orb in his hand, feeling its weight. What had he just been given? And what did it mean for him? He had no idea, but one thing was certain: his life was about to change in ways he couldn't even imagine. He looked up at Lyra, who smiled at him with a look of sadness in her eyes. "Your life will never be the same," she said softly. "You will learn things you never thought possible, but you will also have to face things you cannot yet understand." John had freed her, but in doing so, he had unknowingly stepped into a world filled with dangers and mysteries far beyond his comprehension. What had he gotten himself into? And more importantly, what was Lyra not telling him? A debt of gratitude. The moment John took the glowing orb from Lyra's hand, he felt a strange sensation run through his body, like a shock of electricity that surged from his fingertips to his chest. It was as though the entire room had come alive with energy. His heart raced, his breath quickened, and his mind was flooded with thoughts, images, and feelings he couldn't comprehend. He staggered back, his body trembling under the weight of the power he had just received. Lyra stepped closer, her movements graceful and smooth, as if she wasn't affected by the intense energy that seemed to swirl around them. Her face remained calm, but her eyes, those glowing orange eyes, held an emotion John couldn't quite read. She studied him carefully, almost as though she were waiting for something. John could barely catch his breath as he stared at the orb in his hand. It glowed softly, pulsating like a heartbeat. What is this?" he gasped, still struggling to process what had just happened. Lyra tilted her head slightly, her long silver hair cascading over her shoulder as she regarded him. "It is more than you understand," she said softly, her voice full of mystery. "It is a gift, a token of my gratitude. You freed me from my prison, and in return, I offer you a power beyond anything your kind has ever known." John's mind was still reeling. "I don't understand. I only freed you. I didn't ask for anything in return." Lyra's expression softened, and she stepped even closer. "You don't need to ask, John. This power was always meant for you. It was fate that brought you here, to this ship, to me." She paused, looking away for a moment, as if lost in thought. "The power within you now is not just a gift. It is a responsibility." John looked at her, confused. "A responsibility? I didn't ask for any of this. You didn't ask, but fate has chosen you," she said. "The orb contains the essence of my people's knowledge, their technology, and their strength. It will grant you abilities beyond your wildest dreams, but it also comes with a cost. Power always does." John's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean by cost?" Lyra lowered her gaze to the floor, her voice growing soft. "The more you use the orb, the more you will be drawn into the conflict between my people and those who wish to destroy us. This is a war you didn't choose, but one you must now face. Your world will be dragged into this conflict, whether you want it or not." John swallowed hard. "I didn't ask for any of this. I just wanted to help you." Lyra's eyes locked onto his again, and there was something in her gaze that seemed to both comfort and warn him at the same time. "I know, and for that, I will protect you. But I cannot stop what is coming. The orb is a beacon, and it will attract others who want its power, who will stop at nothing to claim it for themselves." John felt the weight of her words settle over him. He didn't want to be part of any war, but the orb was in his hands now, and with it came a responsibility he couldn't ignore. The choices he made in the coming days would determine not only his fate, but the fate of everyone he loved. Lyra stepped back, her gaze never leaving him. "You are not alone. In this, John. You have me, and together we can face what lies ahead. But you must decide. Will you use the power for good, or will you be consumed by it?" John stood in silence, the orb still glowing in his hand. He could feel the power inside it, pulsing with energy. Part of him wanted to reject it, to walk away from everything that had just happened. But the other part of him, the part that had freed Lyra, that had taken the first step into the unknown, couldn't turn back now. "I'll do whatever it takes," he said finally, his voice firm, despite the fear gnawing at him. "I'll fight for you, for your people, but I won't let this power consume me. I won't lose myself." Lyra smiled, a small but genuine smile. "I believe you, John, and I will help you. But remember, this path will test everything you know about yourself. It will take everything you have to keep your humanity." John looked at the orb in his hand, the glow now seeming to burn even brighter. His mind was racing with questions. What had he just agreed to? What was this power, really? And what kind of war had he just become a part of? But there was no turning back. The choice had been made, and now it was up to him to figure out how to use the gift he had been given. Lyra stepped away from him, her eyes scanning the dark, empty room. "We need to leave. They will be coming for us soon, and you need to learn how to control the power within you before it controls you." John nodded, still trying to grasp the enormity of what had just happened. As he followed her out of the room, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just been set on a path from which there would be no return, and in the distance he could already hear the faint sound of approaching footsteps. The war had already begun. The Gifter air outside the prison room was thick with tension. John and Lyra moved quickly through the dark corridors of the spaceship, their footsteps muffled by the heavy silence. The ship groaned and hummed as if alive, its walls seeming to pulse with an energy that matched the strange feeling now coursing through John's body. He still felt the orb in his hand, a constant reminder of the power he had been granted and the responsibility that came with it. "Where are we going?" John asked, his voice low, as if the walls themselves might be listening. Lyra glanced back at him, her glowing eyes cutting through the shadows like twin beacons. "We need to reach the control room. I have to teach you how to harness the power within the orb. You can't waste any time. We have no idea how much longer we have before they come for us." John didn't need to ask who she meant. The warning in her voice was enough. There was no mistaking it now. He was no longer just a man wandering an abandoned spaceship. He was part of something much larger, something that stretched beyond the confines of the human world. And the more he learned, the more he realized he might never be the same again. As they turned another corner, John caught sight of a large chamber ahead, its entrance marked by strange symbols carved into the metal door. Lyra slowed as they approached, her pace becoming more cautious. "This is it," she whispered. "The control room. But be ready. The moment you activate the orb, it will draw attention from our enemies, from those who would stop at nothing to take its power." John's pulse quickened. He didn't fully understand what that meant, but the look in Lyra's eyes told him everything he needed to know. They were in grave danger. With a deep breath, Lyra reached out and placed her hand on the door. There was a soft hum, and the door slid open with a quiet hiss. Inside, the room was bathed in the glow of advanced alien technology screens. Panels and intricate machinery stretched out across the walls. The atmosphere was thick with the sound of worry and clicking devices, as though the room itself were a living, breathing entity. "We have to be quick," Lyra said, moving to a console in the center of the room. She gestured for John to join her. "Place the orb here." John hesitated for a moment, but the urgency in Lyra's voice pushed him forward. He walked up to the console, a strange pull in his gut urging him to act. He placed the orb in the center of the device, where a glowing socket seemed to open just for it. As soon as the orb touched the surface, it began to hum with energy, its glow intensifying. A sudden surge of power coursed through John's body, making his skin tingle and his heart race. He gasped, staggering back slightly as the power within him began to awaken. "This is just the beginning," Lyra said quietly, her voice steady despite the danger that loomed. "The orb is a key. It will unlock the potential within you, but only if you are ready." John could feel it. The power, the strength, the intelligence, it was all flooding into him. It was as though his mind were expanding, as though he were learning things faster than he could process. Words, concepts, and technologies from across the galaxy flowed into his consciousness like a river bursting its banks. The sensation was overwhelming, but it wasn't just knowledge, it was something deeper. John could feel his body changing, growing stronger. His muscles twitched with energy, and his senses sharpened. He could hear the hum of distant machinery more clearly, feel the temperature in the room shift, even sense the flow of energy within the walls of the spaceship itself. It was as if he could sense everything around him, everything that had ever been and everything that would come. "Focus." "John," Lyra's voice broke through the storm in his mind. "Don't let it consume you. You have to control it. You must learn to wield this power without losing yourself." John gritted his teeth, struggling to maintain control. The force inside him was so powerful, so raw, that it felt like it might tear him apart, but he refused to give in. He had to learn. He had to be strong enough to face whatever was coming. "You can do this," Lyra said, her voice calm and reassuring. "The orb will guide you. It will show you the way." John closed his eyes, taking a deep breath, trying to steady himself. As the swirling energy inside him subsided, he began to focus. He could feel the orb's power, like a distant pulse inside his chest, but now he could control it. He could direct it, shaping it into something useful. For a brief moment, he felt something strange, something not entirely human. The power within him was not just about strength or knowledge. It was something deeper, something that connected him to Lyra's people. He could feel their presence, their hopes, and their pain. It was overwhelming, but it was also beautiful. It was as if he had become part of something much greater than himself. He opened his eyes, breathing heavily, and saw Lyra watching him with a mixture of awe and concern. "You did it," she whispered, a small smile tugging at her lips. "You're ready?" John glanced down at his hands, still tingling with the after effects of the orb's power. He felt different, stronger, smarter, but also more isolated, as if the very power he had just unlocked had set him apart from everything he had ever known. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Lyra's smile faded as she stepped closer. "Now we wait and prepare." For the first time, John realized the full weight of the decision he had made. He had accepted the orb's gift, but with it had come something far more dangerous. The enemies Lyra spoke of, the ones who would stop at nothing to take the orb, were closing in, and now it was his responsibility to protect it, to protect her, and to protect his world from the dark forces that would seek to control everything. He didn't know if he was ready for what lay ahead, but there was no turning back. Now the gift had been given, and the war had already begun. The unseen forces, the control room fell into a tense silence after the orb's power settled into John's being. He could still feel the lingering hum of the energy within him, like an unseen force constantly shifting beneath his skin. It was as if the power had wrapped itself around his soul, threading through every fiber of his being. Despite the power, a dark realization settled in his chest. He wasn't just holding a gift, he was carrying a weapon that could either save or destroy. John turned to Lyra, who stood across from him, her posture rigid and alert. Her glowing eyes never left him, but there was something new in her gaze, concern. Even she, a being from a race as ancient and powerful as hers, seemed cautious. "They're coming," Lyra said, her voice low, tinged with urgency. "I felt them. The moment the orb activated, they knew." "We don't have much time," John nodded, clenching his fists, the pulse of energy from the orb surging in his veins. "Who are they?" he asked, his voice tight. "Who's coming for us?" Lyra's face hardened. "My people's enemies. They are the ones who want the orb, the ones who will stop at nothing to take its power. You have to understand, John, this power doesn't belong to just anyone. It is the key to something far greater than either of us. And it's dangerous. We've kept it hidden for centuries for a reason." John felt a surge of determination. He had already committed to this path. He had freed Lyra from her prison, and now he had become part of her world. But this was something more. It wasn't just about saving one alien girl anymore, it was about stopping something much larger from unfolding. "I'm not running," John said firmly, his voice steady despite the growing storm of uncertainty inside him. "I'll fight. But how do we fight back? I can barely control this power, let alone use it against anyone." Lyra smiled, a slight but knowing curve of her lips. "The first step is understanding the power within you. You're not alone in this. I will guide you, John. Together we can stop them. But it won't be easy." Suddenly, the lights in the control room flickered, the soft hum of machinery intensifying. John felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. Something was coming. "Get down," Lyra shouted. Before John could react, a sharp, high-pitched sound cut through the air, followed by the unmistakable thud of heavy boots landing on the metal floor outside the control room. The enemy had arrived. "They've breached the ship," Lyra said, her voice a mix of fear and determination. "They know where we are." John's heart raced as he spun toward the door, the orb in his hand growing warmer, the energy inside it flaring in response to the approaching threat. He didn't know how to fight, but he could feel something stirring within him. The power inside the orb, the knowledge from Lyra's people, was waking up. We need to move. Now, Lyra urged, grabbing his arm and pulling him toward a narrow hallway at the back of the room. John followed her instinctively, his mind still reeling from the sudden chaos. His senses were on high alert now, sharper than they'd ever been. He could hear the faint hum of the enemy's weapons, feel the vibrations in the floor beneath his feet. The air around him seemed charged, crackling with energy as the orb inside him pulsed again, guiding him. As they moved swiftly down the hallway, Lyra turned to him. Listen to me, John. The power inside you is not just a tool, it's a part of you now. When you use it, you connect to the force that lies beyond this ship. The more you learn, the more you will be able to control. John's eyes widened. What do you mean by connect to the force? Is it like some kind of telepathy? Lyra's expression grew darker. Not just telepathy, it's more. The orb holds the knowledge and power of an ancient civilization. When you use it, you tap into their consciousness, into everything they've ever known and felt. But you must be careful. The more you connect, the more you risk losing yourself. You can't let the power overwhelm you. John nodded, trying to focus as they rounded another corner. He could hear the enemy's voices, no shouted orders, in a language he didn't recognize. They were getting closer. The tension was unbearable. They reached a dead end, a metal door that seemed to pulse with energy. Lyra stood in front of it and pressed her hand against the smooth surface. The door hissed open with a faint metallic groan, revealing a small chamber beyond. Get inside, Lyra said urgently. I'll hold them off for as long as I can. You need to learn to control the power in the orb, John. We don't have much time. John hesitated, then stepped inside the chamber, feeling the cool air rush past him. As he entered, Lyra followed, sealing the door behind them. The chamber was small, but packed with various alien artifacts, ancient consoles, and glowing crystals embedded in the walls. The space seemed to pulse with the same energy that now flowed through him. Lyra turned to face him. This is the last place we'll be safe. The control room is compromised, but here we can teach you how to unlock more of the orb's power. John looked at her, a mix of fear and resolve in his eyes. I'm ready. I have to be. Lyra nodded. Good. Now, focus. John, close your eyes. Trust the orb. Let it guide you. John closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. He could feel the orb, its energy thrumming in his palm. Slowly, the power began to surge again, and this time, he focused on it. It wasn't just about strength or control. It was about understanding the energy that flowed through the ship, through the walls, through him. For a brief moment, it felt as though he were becoming one with everything around him. He could hear the faintest whispers in the air, the ancient voices of those who had come before him, guiding him. The power wasn't just a tool, it was a connection, a link to something vast and infinite. But just as quickly as it came, the feeling faded. John gasped, opening his eyes, sweat trickling down his face. It's too much, he whispered, trembling. Lyra stepped forward, placing a hand on his shoulder. You're not ready yet, but you will be. We don't have much time. The enemy is almost here. You'll need to be strong, John, for both of us. John nodded, his heart pounding. He had no idea what he was up against, but one thing was clear. The war was coming, and now he was part of it. Betrayal from the shadows. The chamber was silent, except for the soft hum of energy in the walls. John's breath came in shallow gasps as he steadied himself. He could feel the power from the orb still pulsing in his veins, the weight of it almost suffocating. Despite his best efforts to focus, the energy was overwhelming, too much, too fast. He had only just begun to grasp the extent of what he had become a part of, and already his control was slipping. Lyra stood by the door, her eyes fixed on him, her expression unreadable. "You must master this," she said quietly, her voice steady. "We don't have the luxury of time, John. They're close, very close." John nodded, wiping the sweat from his brow. He was trying, he truly was, but every time he reached out to control the power, it felt like it was slipping further from his grasp. The whispers in his mind, those ancient voices, were becoming louder, more demanding, and he could no longer tell if they were his thoughts or someone else's. "I know," he whispered, his voice shaky. "I'll try again. I have to." Lyra's gaze softened, but there was a flicker of something else, something more calculating in her eyes. "You will learn quickly, John. You don't have a choice." John stared at the orb in his hand, its glow now brighter than ever. He could feel the raw power within it, seeping into him, reshaping him. He closed his eyes once again, trying to block out the chaotic voices in his mind, trying to focus on something, anything that would help him control it. But just as he felt himself starting to slip into the rhythm of the orb's energy, the door to the chamber slammed open with a deafening crash. John jumped back, his heart leaping in his chest. The orb flickered, its glow dimming for a moment before surging. Again, Lyra's head snapped toward the doorway, her eyes widening. No. A group of soldiers, Zalian humanoid figures in dark armor, poured into the room. They moved with military precision, their weapons aimed directly at John and Lyra. The air was thick with the tension of the moment, the kind that precedes a fight for survival. John barely had time to react before the leader of the group stepped forward. His face was hidden behind a helmet, but his voice was cold and metallic as he spoke. "Lyra, you've made a mistake," he said, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "You should have known better than to trust a human." John felt a cold chill run down his spine. His mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation. These weren't just any soldiers. They were part of the faction Lyra had warned him about, the ones who would stop at nothing to control the orb's power. Lyra's face went pale as she took a step back, raising her hands in a defensive gesture. "I didn't want this," she said, her voice strained. "I never wanted this, but they would have destroyed everything." "The orb, John, it's not just a weapon. It's a key, the key to saving my people." The leader of the soldiers scoffed, his tone dripping with contempt. "You're a fool, Lyra. You've been using this human as a pawn, haven't you? You thought you could control him, make him your weapon. But you've made a mistake. The orb will be ours, and this human will die for it." John's heart pounded in his chest. He felt the power surging within him, but this time it wasn't excitement. It was fear. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected betrayal. The orb, the power he had fought to control, was now a curse, a tool for war, and he was caught in the middle of it all. Lyra turned to John, her eyes wide with desperation. "No, John, listen to me. They've been following me for a long time. They'll stop at nothing to take the orb. We have to run. We can't stay here." John shook his head, the fear in his chest twisting like a knife. "You said you trusted me, but now I see what's really going on. You used me, didn't you?" Lyra's expression faltered, her lips parting in shock. "I didn't use you, John. I didn't know who else to turn to. I'm not doing this for power, I'm doing this to save my people. I swear to you, I never wanted to hurt you." The leader of the soldiers laughed coldly, interrupting her. "It's too late for apologies. You've already sealed your fate." Before anyone could react, the soldiers raised their weapons. John could feel the orb thrumming with energy in his hand, its power begging to be unleashed. But for the first time, he hesitated. He didn't know who to trust anymore. Was Lyra telling the truth? Or had he been nothing more than a pawn in an ancient, deadly game? His mind was spinning as he looked at her. The girl he had freed, the girl who had promised to protect him. But now, he wasn't sure what to believe. In that moment of uncertainty, Lyra's voice rang out, sharp and desperate. "John, you must act now. You can control it. You are the only one who can stop them." Her words cut through his confusion. The orb pulsed in his hand, as if urging him to make a choice. He knew what he had to do. He had no choice but to trust the power within him. With a deep breath, John clenched his fists around the orb, feeling its energy surge through him once. Again. This time, he didn't try to control it. He let it flow freely, allowing the power to take over. The room lit up with an otherworldly glow as energy crackled in the air around him. The soldiers lunged forward, their weapons aimed at him, but John raised his hands, and a shockwave of energy erupted from the orb, blasting them back. The force of the explosion sent them sprawling across the room, their weapons flying from their hands. John's breath came in ragged gasps as he looked at the fallen soldiers. The power inside him was unlike anything he had ever felt before. But there was one thing he knew for sure: he wasn't just fighting for Lyra anymore. He was fighting for his own survival. As the last soldier staggered to his feet, John could feel the energy surging once more, ready to strike. But then he saw Lyra standing in the doorway, her eyes wide with fear. "John, stop," she cried, her voice filled with panic. "Please, don't let it consume you." But it was too late. The power had already taken over, and John realized, with a terrible sense of clarity, that he had crossed a line. There was no turning back now. The final choice. John stood in the center of the chamber, his hands still crackling with the energy of the orb. The air around him was thick with power, the walls trembling as if the ship itself were alive, reacting to the chaos unfolding. His heart raced, but it was no longer out of fear. It was something else, something darker. The power, the force that had once seemed like a gift, now felt like a burden. His body felt stronger, faster, sharper, but his mind, his very soul, was being consumed by it. Lyra stood at the doorway, her hands raised in a pleading gesture, her voice trembling with fear. "John, please, you have to stop. If you keep going down this path, you won't just destroy them, you'll destroy yourself." The words struck him like a blow, but for a moment he couldn't feel anything except the rush of energy coursing through him. The soldiers lay on the floor, incapacitated but not dead. John had only used a fraction of the orb's power, but that was enough. He could see their fear in their eyes, the realization that they were no match for him. And yet, he didn't feel victorious. He felt empty. "What's happening to me?" John muttered, his voice thick with confusion and guilt. The orb in his hand pulsed again, stronger this time, as though it were calling to him. "This is the power you were meant to wield," it whispered to him, though it felt less like a thought and more like a compulsion. Lyra took a cautious step forward. "John, listen to me. This power, it's not meant for you. You weren't ready for it. The more you use it, the more you'll lose yourself. You'll forget who you were, what you stood for. John turned his head sharply to face her. His mind was clouded, but he could still feel the anger bubbling beneath the surface. You don't understand. You gave me this. You made me part of this world. You used me. Lyra flinched, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I never wanted to use you. I never wanted you to become like this. But now you have a choice. You can stop. You can fight back against this power, or you can let it consume you. It's up to you. The silence in the room was deafening. John's mind raced. He wanted to stop, to reject the power, but it felt so right, so necessary. It was as if the power inside him had unlocked something primal, something he couldn't ignore. He felt stronger than he ever had before, more alive. The fear, the uncertainty, the confusion, they all seemed so distant now. But as he stood there, caught between two worlds, the flickering images of the soldiers, of their fear, of Lyra's desperate plea, flashed before his eyes. He thought back to the moment he had freed her, how he had promised to help her. He remembered how human he had felt, then how normal. Lyra, he whispered, his voice cracking. The orb's energy pulsed violently in his hand, reacting to his emotions. I don't know if I can control this anymore. Lyra stepped closer, her voice gentle but firm. You're not alone in this, John. You have the strength to fight it. You just have to believe in who you are, not what you've become. John looked down at the orb, his fingers trembling around it. The glow was so bright now that it almost blinded him. He could feel it pulling at him, drawing him toward something he didn't fully understand. It was like standing at the edge of a cliff, the abyss below tempting him to leap, to embrace the power, to become something more. But the more he listened to Lyra, to the calm in her voice, the more he realized something. This power, this strength, it wasn't him. It was a tool, a force that didn't belong in his hands. He had let himself believe that he could control it, but in reality, it had already started to control him. I don't want to lose myself, John said softly, more to himself than to Lyra. I can't let this power take me. Lyra smiled, a soft, relieved expression crossing her face. Then don't. You're not the orb, John. You're not the power inside it. You are who you choose to be. John nodded slowly, his grip on the orb loosening. He could feel the pull, the seductive lure of the energy, but it wasn't as strong now. It was still there, but he wasn't listening to it anymore. Slowly, carefully, he lowered the orb, watching as its glow began to dim, as if recognizing his decision. But just as the orb's light began to fade, a loud explosion shook the ship. The walls around them groaned, and a sharp, high-pitched alarm blared through the room. The soldiers, those who hadn't been knocked out, were regrouping. The threat was far from over. John, Lyra's voice rang out, urgent. We don't have time. They're coming, and they'll stop at nothing to take the orb. John turned to face her, his heart pounding, but this time he didn't feel like a puppet caught in a war he didn't choose. This time he felt like himself, again like the person who had made the choice to free Lyra, the person who had promised to fight for something more than just power. I'm not going to let them take it, John said, his voice steady. Lyra stared at him for a moment, as if searching for something in his eyes, and then nodded. We fight together. John's pulse quickened. He was ready now, not because he had the power, but because he had made the choice not to be controlled by it. The orb was a key, yes, but it was only one piece of the puzzle. He could use it, but he wouldn't let it define him. as the alarms continued to blare, and the door to the chamber began to crack open. John stood tall. He would fight not for the orb, but for something much greater, his freedom, his humanity, and the future he wanted to protect. With one last glance at Lyra, he raised his hand, feeling the power of the orb once again. This time, though he wasn't letting it control him, he was ready to control it, and together they would face whatever was coming. The final battle was just beginning. The new beginning. The ship was shaking violently as the alarms blared louder and louder, signaling the incoming danger. The walls trembled under the impact of the blasts, and the floor beneath their feet seemed to sway with each jolt. John felt the power surge inside him again, but this time it wasn't overwhelming. It was something he could control, something that he could wield without losing himself. Lyra stood beside him, her face set with determination. She was ready, too. No longer was she the frightened alien girl trapped in a cage. She was a warrior. And together, they had the chance to stop the destruction that was about to unfold. The door to the chamber cracked open with a loud screech, and the first wave of soldiers appeared, their armored forms silhouetted by the flickering lights. They were the same group that had tried to take the orb from them, but now they faced a very different John, one who wasn't just a pawn in their game. John raised his hand, feeling the orb's energy pulse within him, but he didn't need to focus on the power. It was already there, woven into every fiber of his being. The air around him crackled, and the soldiers stopped, their eyes widening in disbelief as they sensed the change in the atmosphere. "You should have left when you had the chance," John said, his voice calm, steady. The soldiers hesitated, and for a moment, John could see the doubt in their eyes. They had thought they were facing a weak, confused humans, someone who didn't belong in the battle they had started. But now, they saw a different kind of strength. The leader of the group stepped forward, his voice cold. "You think you can control this power? You are nothing but a fool, human. You have no idea what you're dealing with." John's eyes locked onto him, the orb glowing brighter in his palm. "I don't need to understand everything. I just need to stop you." With a flick of his wrist, the energy from the orb surged outward, sending a shockwave through the room. The soldiers were thrown back, their bodies crashing into the walls with sickening thuds. The force of the blast was more than they had expected. John had learned to control the power, to direct it with precision, and it was stronger than anything they had ever faced. As the soldiers scrambled to regroup, John stepped forward, Lyra by his side. The glow of the orb illuminated their faces, and for the first time, John felt truly at peace with the power inside him. It was no longer a curse. It was a tool, a weapon when needed, but also a shield. He was in control, not the orb. Lyra gave him a glance, her expression softening for a moment. "You did it, John. You're in control." John nodded, the weight of the situation still heavy on his shoulders. "This isn't over, though. They'll keep coming. And there's still a lot we don't know about the orb and the war that's coming." Lyra's gaze hardened again as she looked around the room, scanning the soldiers as they began to rise. "I've known this day would come, John. We've been preparing for it for centuries. But the key to stopping them isn't just the orbits. Uniting the different factions, finding allies who are willing to fight alongside us." John frowned. "But we're alone, aren't we? You've been on the run for years. How can we possibly trust anyone?" Lyra's eyes darkened. "Trust will be our greatest challenge, but I know who to contact. There are other races, other factions who've been watching, they'll know we're ready to fight back." Before John could respond, the remaining soldiers surged forward again, weapons drawn. This time, they weren't hesitating. They had seen the power of the orb, and they would stop at nothing to take it from him. John raised his hand once more, feeling the orb respond to his every thought. A wave of energy erupted from his palms, blasting through the soldiers once again. But this time, something else happened. The energy didn't just push them back. It stopped them frozen in place, suspended in mid-air as if held by an invisible force. The soldiers struggled, but they couldn't break free. John was no longer just fighting with raw power. He was controlling it, bending it to his will, shaping it like a weapon and a tool. "I can't stop now," John said, his voice filled with resolve. "Not when so much is at stake." Lyra stepped forward, her expression a mixture of admiration and caution. "You've come far, John, but you still have to be careful. There's more at stake than just the orb. There's the future of my people, of your people. The war we're facing isn't one we can win alone." John looked around the room at the immobilized soldiers, his pulse still racing. He could feel the weight of the orb in his hand, its power still surging inside him, but he knew she was right. The battle was just beginning. "I'm ready to face it," John said firmly, "and I'm not doing it alone. You've given me a chance, Lyra, and I'm going to make it count." As he spoke, a new energy filled him, not from the orb, but from something deeper, a strength that came from within. He was no longer just a man caught in a war he didn't understand. He was a part of something much larger now, and with that realization, a sense of purpose washed over him. He would fight not for the orb, but for the future. "Let's finish this," John said, turning toward the door, ready for whatever lay ahead. The final battle wasn't just about the power of the orb. It was about the choices they made, the alliances they forged, and the legacy they would leave behind. Together, John and Lyra would face the unknown, and they would change the course of the war. They would show the universe that they were no longer helpless, no longer pawns. This was their new beginning.